Hello and welcome back to George Past the Post. I wanted to just explore the issue of gerrymandering in the United States, specifically in relation to the upcoming 2026 US House elections that will happen next year. Now, currently there are attempts by Republicans to redraw boundaries in Texas, and Democrats have responded by there'll be a referendum tomorrow actually in California on whether voters want to allow the California state legislature to redraw boundaries. But what I want to focus on is the potential for even more gerrymandering separate from this current situation. And by that I mean, if the Supreme Court were to rule that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act can no longer be used to basically guarantee representation for, or at least some representation for various minority groups. What I mean by this is, so at the moment, take a state where, let's say, it's a very strong Republican state. Let's say there are 10 seats. Now, Republicans can gerrymander that state, but they can still have to give some minority representation, which in most cases effectively means Democrats. So they have to give Democrats at least, say, 1 or 2 seats. I should just point out what I actually mean by gerrymandering. So gerrymandering is where the boundaries of districts are drawn basically in a partisan way. So they're not drawn to really try and drawn fairly. They're drawn by one party or the other to try and make it so that they can win as many seats as possible. That's basically the general idea. But currently, the Voting Rights Act, as it currently stands and has currently been interpreted, limits the gerrymandering that can occur. It can still happen, but it limits it. So even to flip it around, in California, even if Proposition 50 passes and California, then the Democrats redraw their boundaries to limit the number of Republican seats, they can't eliminate Republican districts entirely. They have to give them something. Otherwise, Republicans could then sue California, and it would be argued that no Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act precludes them from drawing a map that is basically, that has no Republicans at all, potentially. So what I'm trying to say here is everyone should be careful, and Republicans especially, Republicans should be careful what they wish for. So on the surface, if the Supreme Court did effectively gut this interpretation and version of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, potentially Republicans can redraw about 19 seats in various southern states. And it could go beyond that as well. Now, Democrats could respond. They could gerrymander even more in the states that are currently already gerrymandered. Now, the net effect of this would be, on paper, that it's even harder for Democrats to win the House next year. Effectively, the Republicans could be awarding themselves, perhaps 20, perhaps less, more seats. So when you start, the notional, at the moment the Republican majority is very small, but notionally the majority would be much bigger if they've redrawn all these seats. But what I'm getting at here is gerrymandering has its limits in the sense that it's, by definition, it can only be based on data from previous elections and party registration, which in America they have. But what it can't do is predict how voters might vote in the future. So just because a particular area might have voted for Donald Trump last year, or might have historically always voted Republican, or may have a majority Republican registration, or Democrat, that doesn't mean that they're going to follow through and vote in that way. You also can't factor in the turnout. My point being that in order to award themselves more seats, Republicans are going to have to, and Democrats in certain areas as well, they're going to redraw seats there. For example, even if a district is on paper 60-40 Republican, that doesn't factor in who will actually vote in the midterms. it doesn't factor in the fact that some registered Republicans may want to vote for Democrats next year. And if there's a big swing on nationally, which there may be, and we don't know what's going to happen in a year, suddenly those seats that they've drawn, or currently very safe seats that they've made a bit more marginal in order to draw out Democrats completely so that the Republicans have all the seats, suddenly those moves don't look so clever. It's no longer a gerrymander, but a dummymander. So, yeah, that's the sort of point I eventually wanted to make, which is that be careful what you wish for, because key motivator for Republican supporters, people who do support the Republicans to vote, is fear of the Democrats controlling the House. But if Republicans have notionally redrawn all the boundaries, basically, what's the motivation for Republicans to vote if they think they're already going to win? And on the flip side, by openly redrawing so many districts and trying to give Democrats no representation at all, I suspect they will make the Democrats in those states pretty angry and even more determined to vote. And you could actually argue that gerrymandering is itself an attempt at voter suppression in that it's designed to make people think there's no point in voting, when in fact it could actually backfire. So, yes, that's my point about gerrymandering. Be careful what you wish for. And I've said it several times. So I'll just leave it there and hope you enjoyed this video. If you've lasted it that long, that doesn't make sense. Honestly, George, I've been, who's the dummy mander now? Anyway, have a good evening and thank you for watching. Goodbye.